Hello, and welcome to the 26th Annual Vermont Grazing and Livestock Conference. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, to bring special attention to the National Grazing Lands Coalition, Food Animal Concerns Trust, Morrison's Custom Feeds, Rural Vermont, and the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. Please visit all of our sponsors' virtual booths for more information about their work. I'd also like to thank our partners. They help make our work possible throughout the year. The National Institute of Food and Agriculture, United States Department of Agriculture, Cedar Tree Foundation, and the Forrest C. and Francis H. Latner Foundation. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about how to use Whova to improve your conference experience. During the sessions, we will take Q&A from the audience. You will submit your Q&A questions under the Q&A tab to the right of the session recording. If you blow the session recording up to full screen, you will lose the tabs to your right. So just remember that you'll have to minimize them, the screen, when you have a question in order to put your question in the Q&A tab. You can also see other attendees' questions. This allows the upvoting of questions to increase the likelihood that they will get asked and answered. There is a chat tab here. This is for you and other attendees to share your wisdom. We will also use it to post resources from the presentations. And you will also find the live captioning link here in the chat tab. For the live captioning of each session, you will cut and paste that link into a new browser window. Please use Google Chrome as your browser. There's also a polls tab and a community board tab. The polls tab will help you provide feedback to the presenters. And the community board will allow you to connect with other attendees. There are a number of networking features within Whova that helps you connect to other attendees. One new feature is the speed networking sessions. We will be hosting one speed networking session on the 22nd from 11:30 to 12:30. This is an opportunity for farmers to sit together and chat at a virtual table. Every 10 minutes, you will be shuffled to a new virtual table, but you'll have a chance to introduce yourself and say hello to new and old friends. You can also email, text, or video call other attendees. You can do this for the next 6 months. For the next 6 months, you can host a virtual meetup or create a discussion group on topics of your choice. Again, please use Google Chrome as your browser, and you have this capability for the next 6 months. Did I mention that you can host a virtual meetup or start a topic discussion group? So this is under your community tab on the left. And there are a number of features where you can start to network with people who have similar questions to your questions. Thank you for participating and spending the time with us for the 26th Annual Vermont Grazing and Livestock Conference. I hope you enjoy the content.
Good morning. I'm Bruce Hennessy, and the president of the Vermont Grass Farmers Association, and I'm really happy to have our guest, Elaine Froese, joining us. Farm and ranch families in transition need tools to talk about tough issues, get clarity of expectations, and act. Elaine Froese has coached over 1,000 families, helping decrease their anxiety over the uncertainty of their future. She's a Wilson Laurie Excellence in Farm Management Award winner who provides practical tools and roadmaps to find fairness in farm transition. 4-H Canada chose her to be their first most distinguished alumna recipient. Froese Family Farms near Boissavin in southwestern Manitoba is her home base. Like many of you, she is also on the transition journey to her successor son, who is 33 years old. Elaine understands the culture of agriculture and is gifted at helping folks see great outcomes and workable paths for their family farms. She's chased a lot of steers in her teens and is looking forward to giving you workable tools for better relationships on your farms and ranches. Her mission is to help families find harmony through understanding. Please give a warm welcome to Elaine Froese.
Thanks, Bruce. And good morning, everyone. Glad to see you here. I'm going to speak for 15 minutes about culture beats strategy and what does that look like? What that means to me is what is holding your operation together, and culture is the invisible glue that's holding your farm together. So I'm going to speak and then Bruce is going to relay questions and we're going to figure out how this can make your life better wherever you're sitting from today. So this is a good screenshot here to take a picture of with your iPhone or your smartphone that's beside your laptop, because this is the core of the conversation this morning.
Oh, okay.
What is it that you all believe to be true on your farm? How do you behave towards each other? And how do you make decisions? So believe, behave, decide. If you had a Post-it note or somewhere sticky that you could put this up, that's the core of the message that I have for you this morning. And there's a woman in Saskatoon, Canada, Dr. Nikki Gerard, who studied farm families for over 12 years. And she came down to the conclusion that strong families celebrate. They, many of you are familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. And in terms of whether you have a culture of believing that you get your affirmation in different ways. But strong farm families also connect with each other and their community to build resilience, and they communicate their vision often. And so this morning, I want to give you some tools and some language around how you can improve getting what you want. And in the handouts in your Whova app, I have given you the phrase that pays, which is a play on my name. So one stormy February day, I'm sitting at this beautiful ranch in Alberta. And the guy says, Elaine, you've given us all these one-liners through your coaching. Could you just kind of put it in a checklist for us? And I said, sure, I can do that. So you have that now, and that's called the phrase that pays. So the first part of this culture beating strategy is what you believe to be true. And this is an old picture of our son, Ian. You can see his meal bucket in his hands. I've just delivered his supper to the cornfield, and he's wearing glasses. But he doesn't wear glasses anymore because he believed it was important to spend $5,000 to get LASIK surgery so he doesn't have to wear glasses anymore and get dust caught behind his eyes, because we spend a lot of time cleaning grain in our certified seed business. But on our farm, we've also done a values assessment, which can be done online, to find out what people truly value. And funnily enough, my son, my daughter-in-law, and my husband all believe in teamwork as one of their core values. Whereas I am very high for independence, which is why I am in Deadwood, South Dakota today, and you're in Vermont or Quebec. Shout out to Ariane from Quebec and to Jen, wherever you are today. We're all over the countryside because we're trying to make our businesses work and do side hustles with other things. But what you believe is your core belief system. And I need you to think about what your vision is. And in farm family transition, or trying to get what you want in your operation, if the culture is such as that the founders, which might be the business owners or your parents, disagree, then things are going to be pretty rocky and bumpy because there's no alignment between the owners of the business. So it's really important that everybody has the same vision for how you want to go ahead. Another thing in terms of what you believe to be true is what gives you energy. So on the left is my husband, and he gets energy from getting stuff done. So we did a personal style assessment on him, and he is ambitious, determined. My son in the Carhartts on that grain tank, he's people and balanced around relationships. And so he's really good in sales and marketing, not so good in getting things always done in a timely fashion. I am good for both of those things, but I am really bad at cognitive detail, which would be things like bookkeeping and accounting and paying close attention to detail. Whereas my daughter-in-law is really high for that. So I would encourage you, as you listen to this, to think about how much do you really know about how the other people in your farm team are actually wired, and what can you do to manage that energy better. And the other thing we'd like to remember is that we work really hard. All of us put in long hours in our operations, but I also need you to think about the play factor in what does fun look like to you, because none of us are machines. And this is where polarities come in, because a polarity is a problem that never goes away. It just has to be managed. So it's really important that you figure that out as well. So my vision for us in our conversation is to really think about how we can talk about tough issues. So I've got discuss the undiscussable, and this is, some of you have seen this, Beanie Baby Bowl. This is my talking stick. And here's another practical tool. When you're having family meetings and making decision, business strategy, operational stuff around the farm or the ranch, or if you're having a family meeting around strategic planning for transition, use something that you can pass around to each other so that the person holding the talking stick does not get interrupted. The other thing I want you to pay attention to in terms of what you believe to be true is working all the time is not going to be great for your marriage. And so pay attention not only to the business relationship, but also to the family circle. And I've got my 3 rings here that I like to use as a diagram for that. So all of us have a certain family dynamic, which is the family circle. But I also want you to think in your brain of the 2 other systems that you're also working with, which is the management system and the ownership system. And what happens in farm families is that they get all grouped together in a really big tangled mess, because people don't have the ability in their head to say, is this a family issue? Is this a business issue? A management issue, ownership issue? What is this? And if you can separate that out, that will help you resolve the conflict by attacking the issue and not attacking the person. The other thing that really concerns me with farm families is, okay, Elaine, nice to hear you talk today in January, but we'll take care of this after calving's done. Well, no, we'll take care of it after planting. No, we'll take care of it after spraying. Oh, no, we'll take care of it after harvest, actually. And we'll have a little family holiday in there, maybe, hopefully. And then after harvest, no, we'll take care of it after Christmas. And then what's happened, folks? A whole farm year has gone by. So procrastination in culture beating strategy comes up when the first generation, the founders, have a fear of letting go of control, but you also haven't really shared what your core beliefs are to understand how everybody's wired. So this is a values cloud. Again, take a snapshot of it with your camera. If you'd like to have this, I can also send it to Megan, and we'll have it put in the Huva notes. So Megan, just make a note of that, and I'll send that along too. But it's just really important to see where you're pulling in the same direction and where you're different. So here's one of my phrase pages for improving the culture on your farm. Ask for what you need. Is now a good time to talk? Yes or no? Can I have a decision from you by supper time tonight? Love does not read minds. So really, really put that into perspective. Another concept I want you to understand is the whole concept of the neutral zone, which is the pain of not knowing. So where you're sitting this morning at your laptop, what is the one thing that you would really like to know that's causing you to stay awake at night, that's stressing you out, that you don't know? Because staying in that neutral zone, like having a gear shift that's wobbling back and forth, that is not a fun place to be. And so what you want is a new beginning. And what needs to begin is passing the talking stick around and communicating what you all want. Now, here's another core tool for you to understand is, how old are you? I am 65. So I am now in this stage of legacy building, starting over, looking at what my income streams are going to be from our farm as we age in place, and taking good care of my health. If you're in your 20s, you should be becoming more independent from your parents. If you're in your 30s, it's mastering success. It's also an exhausting decade. But by the time you're 40, I, as a coach, want to see you as the main manager of the operation. And you're going, oh, good luck with that, Elaine. I'm 45 and I still don't have signing authority on the checks. That is precisely the problem, is that you need to understand how old you are and what the age tasks are for each generation. In your 50s, I have a 50-year-old right now who's actually 55, very proactive on his transition journey, but he's simplifying his life because he wants to travel more, and he's grooming the next generation to take over management. And then some of you have grandfathers who still haven't let go, and that's frustrating you. And by the time you're in your 70s, you should be taking on more of a mentoring role. And in your 80s, you really need to be handing it all over in my books, and obviously also in your 90s. So again, pay attention to what is not working in terms of the neutral zone, combined with how old you are, and that will give you information as to why you're feeling that way. So are these two Angus bulls fighting, or are they playing? They're actually playing, but we can all be looking at the same scenario and see something totally different. So one of the key culture beat strategy tools is to put yourself in the other person's shoes and into their perspective. Take their perspective and don't guess at what they're thinking, feeling, needing, and wanting, but actually ask them. And as Bruce said in my introduction, I want you listening today to have clarity of expectations. My family is happy that I'm traveling again, speaking in the US, because that's what I do to bring additional income to the farm. And I haven't been able to do live in-person events for 2 years. So today is a really big day for me. Certainty of timelines and agreements. So another phrase that pays is by when. By when will we have our wills signed? By when will we have a better compensation structure? By when do you want to move out of this house, mom and dad? And actually put some targets around it so that you can have a commitment tag. The next piece is how you're behaving with each other. And that tall, skinny guy on top of my, you would call semi, we call them semis in Canada. That's Mike, our mechanic, who's a wonderful employee, getting the tarp ready for the harvest. And so we have a very strong farm team, but we always have to keep working with each other on sharing what's going on in our mind, which is that purple cloud, what is our intent, how we show up with our actions and words, and then what effect is that having on people. And Bruce, I'm just going to do a time check here. When I'm at my 15 minutes, I just want you to do a T in the Zoom window, okay? So that I know where we're at, because I'm not sure because of the video. So again, folks, this is Conflict Resolution 101. If you want better behavior on your farm and ranch, get very clear about your intentions and use your words to say, it's not my intention, Bruce, to irritate you, but I need to know, have you paid the bills? It's not my intention, Jen, to question the quality of your work, but I'm just checking in. Did you get the cows checked last night? And so again, we have this thing that I call a conflict filter. And right now I'm working with a mother and father whose conflict profiles online, my conflict profile assessment, they came up beautifully. They have really strong conflict skills, but the daughter-in-law is not happy at all. And she has this filter that whatever her in-laws do, it has to be something to irritate her. And my goal as the coach is to get rid of that filter and say, look, Jane, your behavior counts too. And you paint this picture that your in-laws are such nasty people. But when I look at their conflict profiles, they're actually pretty good on how they do conflict. You're the one who has to also check what your intention is. And I hope that makes sense to you. So, and all of this is to say is that on our farms, Bruce and I were talking earlier about hidden factors of what's really happening on your farm and ranch. And it's these emotional things and these dynamics. You don't have to be a therapist. I always say counseling is about recovery. Coaching is about discovery. What I want you to discover this morning is how is all this emotion that's going on and the glue, the culture of your farm, how is that affecting your planning and your health? And one of the biggest tools I have is to come from curiosity. If you want to discuss the undiscussable, I want you to say this phrase: I'm just curious, Bruce, how many hay bales do you think we need to finish out the winter? I'm just curious, Mom. You look like you're getting really tired doing the books and your quality of work is starting to slip. Would you like to start training somebody else to take over the accounting on this ranch? And when you come from curiosity, people don't feel judged. People want to feel appreciated. And one of the top reasons that Tom Hubler found, he was my business coach when I was a student in 2003 in getting my coaching certification. One of the top reasons that succession plans go sideways is for lack of appreciation. And the goal here is, and this is all the work that's on this screen, is based by a book called Encouraging the Heart by Pusner and Kautz. And the whole idea is people forget the intentionality we have to pour goodness into the culture of your farm by having appreciation, managing the trust, and saying, I'm getting this feeling that you don't trust me very much because of something that happened. What do I have to do again to build the trust? And we all need to jump into conversations we don't want to have. But again, it's your mindset. And wouldn't it be good to have that weight lifted off to you by having that courageous conversation? We need meaningful work, which is where we need to pay attention to our job descriptions. And we also need time to play. So show appreciation, build the trust, and pay attention to the conflict dynamic. So here are the 5 key pieces. And Bruce, if we're getting close to the end of the time, we'll just finish off with this piece. This is what's going to make you unstoppable. The fact that you are looking at the problem to create solutions, not attacking the person. The fact that you can express emotion, and I'm giving you all permission to cry, men and women, and that's deep emotion because you're frustrated that you're not getting something that you really, really want, and say, I think it's time we sat down to talk about the business vision as a family. I feel like we're stuck. I need more clarity, and I want to know when I can get equity. Was that hard to say? Did that take long? No, but you were very clear. And then you also reach out and you make the first move, and you know what? And you say, I don't think we can do this on our own. I think we should reach out and get a facilitator to help us. Another positive behavior is to, in the heat of the moment, if things are getting escalated, you go, you know what? We're not making sound decisions because everybody's rational brain has left the room with all this drama. So I'm going to walk away for 10 minutes. I'm going to cool off and I'll be back. Or maybe you're going to walk away till tomorrow and you're going to say, we're going to revisit this decision tomorrow. And then the whole thing that you actually have the capacity with Culture Beat Strategy to be an adapter. So Bruce, I'm going to stop there and let you open it up for questions.
Great, Elaine. Thanks so much for that. And I know you have days and days worth to give on this, but one of the things that we thought we would do with this session is to put out some real life scenarios that we know about. Excuse me. And these are real life. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. I don't use any names actually, but these are real life things that are coming out of farms that we're aware of. So I'll just start out with the first one. One of our most, this is as if the farmer is speaking to you. So right. One of our most talented, skilled, and experienced staff members manages stressful situations by lashing out. When given feedback about this, she says that is the only way she gets results. She also states that not being aggressive when giving feedback is the same thing as coddling other staff. Other staff report that they are fearful of the response they might get when giving feedback or disagreeing with this staff member and have decided to say nothing and simply avoid her if at all possible. In response to this feedback, the staff member retreats and says nothing to the staff when correction is needed. How do we give and receive feedback without eliciting defensiveness or driving people to clam up or flare up?
Great question. And what came to mind, Bruce, is you can't hug a porcupine. So, and another saying is you'll get way further with honey than you will with vinegar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer your question, but I'm also going to click through the slides just as a response to how that might fit the scenario. So this person has what I would call a misguided concept of difficult feedback, that and the telling word was coddling, that you have to be harsh. You don't have to be harsh. Brené Brown says, Being clear is kind. So if you want to give difficult feedback, you should do it in a tonality that's not harsh or hostile. Because if I was to show you the slides about destructive conflict behavior, anger and hostility are destructive. So this manager that you're talking about, this person who's giving the harsh feedback, she's being a bully. And I just want you to call it what it is. So if I was in that situation, I would take this slide here. This is the work of Rick Maurer, and the book is called Why Don't You Want What I Want? And it's whether the intellectually, so intellectually, this person that you've described feels that she's going to be a wimp kind of leader unless she comes across with a harsh tone, which is totally wrong. You want to be calm, you want to be clear, you want to be kind, you want to be collaborative. So just when you look at this slide, pushback comes intellectually. So intellectually, this person has a warped view of how to do difficult feedback. The other thing is the heart, and that's the whole part about expressing feeling. So rather than her workers cowering back out of fear, they really have to take courage and say, hey, Jane, I don't like how this feels. I intend to work here for a very long time. And as a manager, I would expect you to treat me with respect. And the way you lash out at us and think that being harsh with us is anti-coddling, I totally disagree with you. And I need you to speak to me in a better tone of voice. And I need you to use a more respectful way of communicating. And then in the gut receptor is, I don't like how this feels, because it's also breaking trust, right? So I say the 4-H pledge. I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living. And that helps me remember that when you're in this conflict situation, is it because the other person doesn't understand something intellectually in their head? Or is it because emotion has overpowered everything else and they don't like how it feels? Or is it because they're losing trust because they don't trust that it's going to work out? Hope that answers that question. And there it is. It's all about respect.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for that. I've got a second scenario here. I've been managing, in quotes, a farm for my in-laws for the last few years. My father-in-law runs a breeding stock and commercial beef herd, and his daughter and I live and work a second farm with his cows. We want this to be our home, and I want to farm for a living. My father-in-law treats me like a hired hand and refuses to have discussions about how I might move into a real managing role in his operation. My wife and I are due to have a child soon, and I want to feel secure where we are and that we have a way to grow here. My father-in-law feels like he has to be fair to all his kids when it comes to opportunities and ownership on the farm, even though none of the other kids, my wife's siblings, show any interest in working on the farm.
Welcome to the biggest problem in agriculture in 2022, finding fairness in farm transition. And I want everybody listening to this today and the recording to write down finding fairness in farm transition. And then I want you to hop onto YouTube and make some popcorn tonight or next week and listen to my whole hour presentation on this. Because the fairness issue, Bruce, is around financial transparency. Where is it written that the father-in-law is to make all of his children economically equal? It's not. Fairness to me is helping everyone in the family be successful. So it behooves the fact, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Maybe not. And I'm in the mountains. The altitude has changed. So the fairness issue is FAIR. Write that down. Financial transparency, attitudes towards money, your intentions, which we talked about in that conflict piece. What are your intentions? And roles and responsibilities and how we deal with rebels, which is the R. So for this son-in-law, the reason this slide is apropos, Bruce, is this is Instant Influence, a book by Michael Pant, P-A-N-T, Alon. And this is a fantastic tool. Father-in-law, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being really ready, how ready are you to sit down and talk about changing management of this farm? Because remember, there's a progression, Bruce. You go from management to ownership, and they might not happen at the same time. And the succession plan or the transition plan is around management working towards ownership. The estate plan is for what happens when that father-in-law is dead. But why can't he shift some of the ownership and the equity why he's living? And if I was that son-in-law, I would ask about structure of the business and what the timelines look like for him getting a 25% share. And the daughter, his wife, his spouse, is she also going to get a 25% share, right? Or if there's not going to be a corporation, is there going to be an operating agreement? So in our case, when Wes and I came back to the farm, when Wes graduated college 40 some years ago, we were at 60% the parents' income, 40% us. Then we worked towards 50-50. And then in 1992, we had a meeting with an accountant and we worked to us owning 100% and the parents owning 0. And you see, that was a progression. And so some people have that this is all going to happen in one big whack of a day. And it doesn't have to be that way. So using the numbers on a scale of 1 to 10 with how ready are you to change, or how ready are you to start giving me more management control? If the father-in-law says 2 and the guy's number is 9, then you have a 7-degree gap. And then you have to decide, how long are you waiting for his stubbornness and pride for him not to be letting go of ownership or management? And maybe you don't want to stay, or maybe he will see that he's crushing your dream. And Bruce, that's the other piece, is using language about, I would coach the daughter in this situation to say, Dad, do you have any idea how your pride and stubbornness and inaction is crushing our dream to be the next generation of running this farm? And that's in a direct quote, Bruce, from a guy in Ottawa who was on one of my coaching conflict seminars. And he said, Elaine, when I finally used that sentence with my father-in-law, he finally understood the urgency of having these conversations. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much for that. Those are really difficult situations, but they happen all the time.
Yeah.
So we do have some questions, but I think they're apropos for the end so far anyway. So I'm going to move on to the third scenario. A group of female members feel that they are being treated as less than by certain male staff members. They are describing their experience as being subjected to aggressive or negative feedback and work expectations from male staff. Mansplaining and feeling like their ideas are undervalued compared to male staff. The term toxic masculinity is used to describe the women's feelings. The women approached a female manager on the staff about their concerns, and a decision was made to have a confidential meeting about what was happening, without notifying farm owners about the problem. During the meeting, notes were kept and shared with some women who were not in attendance, even though the meeting was supposed to be confidential. Subsequently, notes from the meeting were shared with the male staff members that were the subject of the complaints. The result is a lot of hard feelings within the staff and the overall staff and ownership, and the overall culture feels damaged.
So the question is, what part of confidential do you not understand? Right? So that's one key piece. The other thing that's disturbing, Bruce, is who is the lead manager? Who's the CEO of this business? And because the culture and the tone for culture starts at the top, and what's acceptable and not. And another
Can I break in there and answer that question? So the CEO of that business is the owner. There's two owners. There's a couple that owns this farm. The female is the CEO, the male is the COO. Neither one was made privy to these conversations until it came out inappropriately to the group.
Right. So there's a lot of I call it conflict repair. John Gottman has this book called 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, and he says make quick repair. So the first thing is you can't ignore that there's a problem. You can't ignore that the females are feeling less than. And the other thing from a conflict standpoint, that is a phrase that pays, is you get the behavior that you accept. And so these women are no longer willing to accept toxic behavior or mansplaining or disrespect, right? And so I would encourage the group to come together. Well, I would encourage two things. First of all, I would bring an outside facilitator for conflict resolution and mediation to the female first. So I'd working with what the females are feeling. Then I'd work with the men with what the men are feeling. And then I'd put the men and the women together in the same room and say, hey guys, we're going to pass this bull around today. And this is your opportunity to come clean and make repair for past mistakes. Because on this farm, this is not the culture we want. Everyone here is skilled. Everyone has value to contribute. And we are no longer going to accept disrespect and secrecy, right? So again, that's a very, and again, strong people, whether they're men or women, Bruce, need to stand up and say, we're not going to allow that to happen. Sorry, I finally sneezed. So here's the triangle. It's called a conflict triangle, and that's exactly what you have, because one of those women in that meeting of women, they were supposed to be in a meeting of women like this to go head to head and to understand each other and to make deep connection. But when someone broke confidentiality by sharing the notes outside of the group, they created what we call a conflict triangle. And in conflict resolution, you want to flatten the triangle. And so in order to flatten the triangle in this group, you need everyone to be given a chance to explain why they're behaving the way they're behaving. And then you have to nip it in the bud and saying, well, that's no longer accepted. And in human resource terms, of which I am not a specialist, typically there's a verbal warning, a written warning, and then 3 strikes and you're out. So then my other question in this farm is, who's the accountability partner? And is that the female CEO or is that the male COO? So again, there's all kinds of layers of complexity here, Bruce, but I think, first of all, the person who broke the trust and broke the confidentiality, that person needs to apologize for a misstep. And again, what's the culture of forgiveness on your farm when you do make a mistake? On our farm, there's been $100,000 mistakes made by mixing up grain unintentionally. And there's no drama or shaming or blaming or toxic whatever. It's okay, we now have a mess. What's your plan? Okay, I've checked the markets. We're going to sell it as feed now, not seed. So again, that accountability piece I think is really important. And again, you get, my bottom line to your question is, you get the behavior you accept. The women no longer want to accept the less land or the mansplaining behavior. And I suspect, Bruce, that the men don't even know what they're doing, because funnily enough, 3 weeks ago, my brother was visiting and his girlfriend said, "You're mansplaining." And he said, "What the heck is that?" And he didn't know. He didn't even know what he was doing. So some of the guys on that farm may not even be aware, self-aware of how not helpful their behavior is.
Gotcha.
And you can make people aware by being kind. Okay. I'm just going to flip through. Okay.
I certainly have been unaware of my behaviors in that respect, so I understand.
And
why that might be true.
I just flipped ahead in my slides. There's a beautiful book by Dr. Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings: What to Do When Things Don't Work Out. And there are sometimes signs that it's time to go. And I have had young farmers who were in such unworkable culture situations, Bruce, that they said, "Elaine, thank you for giving us this book. We've made a decision to leave." And they have left the ranch, and they left with the parents' blessing of $1 million, Bruce, for this guy to have a different startup business. Now, not every father is going to give his kid $1 million when they leave. I don't expect that to be true for everybody, but it speaks to the maturity of understanding that between a certain set of brothers, it was never going to work. They did the research, they did the coaching, and this is the conclusion they came to. So sometimes you may have to go.
Right. So here's a follow-up question about this particular scenario. What are some suggestions you might offer for getting unstuck, especially if you feel like you've been expressing yourself, but things have not changed?
Okay, get farm transition unstuck or get unstuck. First of all, is be very clear yourself personally, what is it you want? And I often encourage young farmers to sit down with their spouses and to drop a 1-page or 2-page business plan. This is the vision of how life would look on my farm or ranch if I was able to create the vision that I want. And then the couple needs to be in alignment. Because as I said earlier, Bruce, if the spouses don't agree, then you're going to stay stuck. And so the other curiosity I would have, say, coming from the position of a young farmer, is if my parents are stuck, Elaine, what can I do to help them get clear? I said, well, maybe a coaching relationship would be helpful, because there's a lot of, there's also, Bruce, this thing called embarrassment or humiliation in founders. And what that is by the time I'm 65, I want to be debt free, own this many cattle, and have this many acres in Vermont. Well, guy turns 65. He's got $2 million of debt. The cattle prices aren't great, and he's not where they want to be financially. And plus their personal wealth bubble is really low. So the other thing I would suggest is getting a financial planner, because the 3 key questions why families are typically stuck, and I want everybody listening to write these 3 words down, because this is going to give you a map. Number 1, income stream. Do the parents have a decent income stream? And what is their income stream going to be as they age? So for Wes and I, we know that for the next 20 years, we'll be well taken care of, because we've sold our seed business to our son, and he's going to pay us out over 20 years. We're never going to sell him the land, because he can never afford it. So that will be taken care of as a rollover. Second question, where is everybody going to live? Because if mom is 65 and she wants a new $500,000 house, that's why they're stuck. Because first of all, their financial position is not that great, and they're struggling with wanting to move in a different place, but they haven't got the funds or the working capital to do that. The third question is what you mentioned in your earlier question, which is around fairness. Parents lie awake at night thinking about what they secretly or have openly promised to their children. And here's the other phrase that pays. That was then, this is now. My son, Bruce, bought land when he was 21 for $220,000 a quarter. Our neighbors got divorced 5 years later. My son wants to buy the quarter across from his land. In 5 years, that land has doubled to $440,000. And that is the tension that we're in agriculture, is the numbers just keep getting bigger and bigger. And this week I learned about a sprayer contract in Saskatchewan that was $1 million. Are you kidding me? My sprayer was 450 grand, and that was bad enough. So with all of this money complexity of the operation side, we have to pull back and look at what is it that people need to be well. They need a decent income stream, the founders and the next gen and the next gen. So you need to look at the money data. And so people are stuck because they do not have financial transparency. So I want all the young farmers listening today to have a business plan. I want you to go to Farm Credit East, because I noticed they were one of our sponsors. Thank you, Farm Credit. I want you to go to your lender of choice and find out, if I needed to buy something in equity of this farm today, how much am I good for? And I had a young farmer, a young beef farmer in Saskatchewan said, Elaine, I went to FCC and I'm good for $750,000. And I go, yes, because now we have data to have a discussion with Papa. And Papa came to the table and he was in tears. And he said, Dad, why are you crying? He said, I'm crying, son, because Elaine sent me to Saskatoon. And I went to the financial planner. And the financial planner told me that I need $40,000 a year income flow from the farm. And the son said, well, Dad, that's great. He said, what do you mean? I had planned to just roll things over to you. He says, Dad, you don't have to. I've got a debt servicing capacity with a lender. And so do you see what I've just done, Bruce? We've discovered things. We've done some research. we put money data and concrete, practical decision-making tools. So here's how you make a decision. Identify the problem, do your research, pull in all the possible options to solve the problem, and pick something to solve it, and then actually act. But decision-making 101 is not common practice.
It sure isn't. So I see in our questions, we're leaning more towards kind of the soft skill sides of things. So if it's all right with you, I think we will
Yep.
ask those questions. How do we find the sincerity behind the language change that you're talking about? Just saying that you're curious, or that you appreciate someone may be different than actually being sincere, or actually how I feel. Do you just fake it until you make it?
Absolutely not. My highest value, Bruce, is honesty. There is no faking here. You have to align. That's why I started with believe, behave, and now I've got decide on the screen. You believe what you believe to be true. So if you're in a not healthy or not good place because of the dynamic on your farm, my first question is, what are you doing for you to be stronger and to be well? So maybe you actually need to go for counseling. Maybe you need to do a conflict dynamic profile self-assessment to see where you lie in the skills of doing conflict well and what your hot buttons are. Because the other thing the assessment shows is what your triggers are. And my triggers are people who don't talk to me, people who are aloof. And silence is a form of abuse. Silence in coaching can be a place of let the silence do the heavy lifting when a very serious thought has just been put on the table. But the flip side, the bad side of silence, is that when people storm away and don't talk, then that's abusive, because you can't create solutions with someone you can't have a conversation with, right? But fake it till you make it is not wise.
Right.
That's not wise.
I think you can be honest and still be respectful. Would you say that's true?
And you can also say, I'm having a really hard time here. I don't know if you've noticed, but since I heard Elaine Froese speak on January 21st, 22, I have been working very intentionally to change my approach. But what's really disappointing is that no matter what I do, nothing seems to shift on your part. And that's where this is so hard, Bruce, is because I can only fix Elaine Froese. I used to hold up one of those 9/16 wrench. You know, everybody loses their 9/16 wrench. And I'd say, Elaine Froese can only fix Elaine Froese. And my husband is a very good mirror, and he'll say, are you okay? And I go, no, I'm actually quite agitated right now because I need to get a negative COVID test in order to get back into my country tomorrow. And I'd like to tell you all I tested negative yesterday in Minneapolis. So I'm very happy. I'll be able to go home tomorrow. But when we're in tune with each other, it's okay to say, are you okay? No. Do you want to talk about it? Not right now. When do you want to talk about it? Maybe after supper. And you just, and you don't take it personally. When my husband is upset, which is very rare now, I'll say, do you want to talk about this? And he'll say, no, not right now. And then I respect that because he's very introverted and he figures things out by being quiet. I'm totally opposite. I'm extroverted. So I want to figure things out by talking it through. And so for this person who wants to be sincere and she wants to change her behavior, just start doing it.
Right. So along with that, do you recommend daily, weekly, or monthly practices to create, build, and foster the deep, meaningful connections in the operations you describe?
So one of the meaningful connections is every day how you can put deposits into the emotional bank account of the people around you. When is the last time you heard your father said, I love you and I'm proud of you, son? That is the language spoken. Or that in our house, our son, who you can see on this slide sitting in the yellow t-shirt or the orange t-shirt, he will write notes to his father at Christmas or Father's Day and saying, thank you, Dad, for all of the opportunities you've given me. But my husband's love language is not words or cards. His love language is get her done. Show me. do the action. And so when you ask that, Bruce, there's many different ways on a daily basis of how you can put deposits in the emotional account. But Dr. David Cole's research way back at Virginia Tech in 1997, one of his grad students studied 400 farms in 6 states. And what the research showed is that the families that meet regularly for business meetings are 21% more profitable. Now in this picture, Wes is in the blue t-shirt, and he and Ian work shoulder to shoulder every day. So their meetings are kind of like ongoing. But if there's going to be a large capital expense, they'll sit down with the numbers and with the accountant and work things through and figure out if this is a good idea or a bad idea. So your meetings can also be of 2 kinds, or 3 kinds actually. They can be operations of the farm and ranch. They can be strategic for succession planning or transition. And the other mindset shift I want you to understand is, I am on a succession journey. My son is now 33, married with 3 kids. He's bought one piece of the operation, but we now have a joint venture between his corporation and our corporation. Our succession plan, Bruce, will not be done until Wes and I are both dead. And I hope that that's about 20 or more years from now, right? And so people get it in their idea that it's all this one big event. It's not. It's like now you're on this journey that's unfolding, just like your relationships are unfolding. So my other daily or practice would be with my daughter-in-law is, if I sense that there's some irritation, this is the magic question. Are you okay? Tell me what's going on for you right now. And so she does. And then I say, what would you like me to do differently? And she'll say, I'm good with you. I have there's nothing going on right now with you, Mom. And she calls me Mom, and I'm her mother-in-law. And so again, it's the courage, Bruce, to ask, are you okay? You don't say, how are you? You say, how are you doing? Doing is a much more powerful question, because it's not a flippant answer. And they say, I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm exhausted. Well, and you're not making good decisions, and you're getting irritated more easily if you're exhausted. She's a mother of 3 children under 4. It's a very busy household.
That's a that's a lot to unpack, but that's a tremendous amount of value to us, I think. I wonder, we have about 8 minutes left. I wonder if it would make sense to have another.
Sure.
Okay. On a small diversified livestock operation, the owner hires interns or apprentices to work for the season. The interns are offered a room in the farmhouse, some farm food, and a weekly stipend of just $200 a week. Hours are 50 to 60 hours per week. The stated goal for the apprentice position is that the low pay and long hours are given in exchange for learning how to farm. After a month on the farm, the interns are feeling that they are working hard, but not learning a whole lot more than the basics of feeding and setting fence. When confronted about this, the owner states that the first thing they need to do is learn how to work. The interns are frustrated that they are not getting educational value out of the experience, and the farm owner is upset that the interns are slow, do poor quality work with a lack of attention to detail, and exhibit negative attitudes.
Okay, Bruce, in your little packet of Huva, I've given you Jim Solden's performance appraisal. I don't know that Megan's going to put it up today or shortly.
She is putting it up, yep.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here, and interestingly enough, I grew up on a farm that had 19 trainees, but they weren't paid such low wages. And no matter how hard they worked, they were paid very fairly. And my mom and dad were so generous, they didn't charge them the $200 room and board. They stayed, that was just part of their perk for being there. We have an attitude problem here, or an expectation problem. The older generation has a mindset about work, 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 work. And what the interns or the apprentices are wanting is learning. But there's no mechanism here, Bruce, that I heard you talk about for people to sit down and say, what are the learning outcomes you want by being on this farm? And right now we have a South African working for us for 2 years, which we have sponsored to come to Canada. And he and his wife are immigrating here. And so we're very used to having people in a training situation. And so the first thing is the interns are not happy because I think they're being abused. They're not being paid well, and they're not learning what they came to learn, but they're being criticized, you said, by not paying attention to detail and not working hard enough. So then the communication needs to be listening more, and then like what I've got on the slide here, taking the perspective, okay, so tell me, what is my job description? And Dick Whitman has a great binder that is now digital. It's at Whitman, WITTMAN consulting.com. If any of you have $150 US to spend on management, I would spend it there, because you'll get the digital workbook. But in that workbook are two things: job descriptions, it's a 7-page list. And the second thing that's in that management consulting book are compensation worksheets of what is fair compensation in terms of farm perks. But the apprentices, I mean, once you've got standard labor and chores done, that's one thing. But where are they learning about how or why decisions are made? And where are they learning about the finances of cash flow and how much things cost? And where are they learning about mechanics and maintenance? So Bruce, I don't know enough about what these, so first of all, I need to know, what do the apprentices expect? And I get them just to, blot themselves down on a Word document. This is what I expect to learn. Boom, 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 boom. And then the owner or the trainer, the farmer guy, he should say, this is what I expect from the apprentice program. Boom, 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 boom. He writes that all down. Okay. And now you bring both parties to the table and you say, okay, farmer dad guy, founder, read me your list. What do you expect from the apprentices? How do you expect to mentor and train them? And what's probably happened, Bruce, is that this man has no hot clue how to lead or train people. He's a workaholic farmer who wants his livestock fed, and he wants the grass trimmed, and he wants the gates closed a certain way. And don't you dare do it a different way, because he hasn't learned the other phrase that pays, which is different is not wrong. It's just different. Okay. And my heart goes out to these young kids, because the other thing I did is, did these apprentices, did they interview this guy first to see if he was a teacher or to see if he was a slave driver, right? Like, right. And also, was there any chemistry around how to have difficult conversations? Like, my husband has never had a job interview. I mean, he came home from college with his plant science degree, and his dad gave him the keys to the farm because his dad was also a pastor. And he said, I love you. Well, I don't even think he said, I love you, son. He just gave him the keys to the farm. He said, yeah, I know you'll do great. I'm so glad you're in charge now. My husband's been in charge since he was 22 years old. Wow. That's a long time.
That is a long time. That's amazing.
Yeah.
One last question. Can you talk about the ramifications of making legacy gifts with a warm hand in quotes versus a cold hand in quotes?
So I'm a big believer in warm hand, Bruce, for two things. Farm litigation and estate work is exploding because wills have been changed, wills have not been written well, and wills have also been written by hand. But please don't do that. So everybody listening today, I want you to make an appointment with your lawyer by next Tuesday. If you don't have a will and if you don't have an enduring power of attorney. And even if you're a young farmer and you think you don't have anything in terms of assets or not very much, I still want you to do that. Okay. The warm hand concept is, we gave Ian a $100,000 quarter section when he was 21, because he was 21 needing to come up with $220,000. Where is he going to get that kind of money? He was also a young farmer. So in Canada, you're a young farmer until you're 40, and there's certain rebates and loans and better mortgage rates that you get when you're a young farmer. And so giving a young person a leg up in their 20s or their mid 30s is way better than making them wait for ownership until they're 65. And it's also, Bruce, what's called the time opportunity of money, right? Compounding interest on equity when you're young is much better than getting it 40 years out. The other thing about a warm hand is that you can have the joy of giving the gift or giving the opportunity. It might be a buyout, so it might be an opportunity. It might not necessarily be a gift. And then you get to see the next generation grow that. And so you get the joy and the appreciation of being in the present moment rather than being dead when nobody's going to appreciate what you've done because you're dead.
Right.
And my mother-in-law did this beautifully. She died over the course of 4 months with lung cancer, which was palliative for 4 months. And she would sit in her hospital bed and the grandchildren would come to the bed and say, Grandma, thank you for the $10,000 that you're giving me when you die. I'm going to go to business school at Western. I'm going to buy a better equestrian horse. I am going to do a study tour of Kenya with my university. I am going to put that money towards my airplane. And those are 4 real examples of what her grandchildren did with the gift. And that gift, of course, came with a cold hand because she died first. But the analogy is still there, is people, young farm families today, they also don't need just money. They need time. They need the currency of time. So if you're going to give your daughter-in-law 12 hours of childcare a week, that's a huge gift, right? Because that's giving her time for her own mental well-being and to do other things. What about the gift of equipment? We don't charge our son custom rates for planting his 5 or 6 quarters, but we know the value of those custom rates is somewhere north, Bruce, of $21,000. And how do we know that? Because our accountant tells us every year what that is worth. Now, the flip side of that is people who want to be paid for everything, and that's destroying the culture of agriculture, because we give our former employee, who's now 80 years old, the snowblower whenever he darn well wants it to clear out his house. Do we charge him? Are you kidding me? He's given us his right arm for 35 years to help our farm grow. So I want generosity of spirit, and it says on this slide, you get the behavior that you accept, create a great culture. So in closing, what are you doing intentionally on your farm today to make it the most amazing place to be, that everyone is online, what they believe, how they behave, and how they make decisions? You can do this, but you have to pay attention.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That is exactly the kind of message that I need, and I think many of us do. So thank you so much for that. We are at the end of our time here. The one last thing, and we could take care of the nuts and bolts of this after. We were wondering if you had a book list that you could share that we could post up for our audience. Would you be able to do that, do you think?
I'll work on that tomorrow on the plane.
Okay.
I have a book list, but it's now 10 years old, Bruce, and that's how time flies.
Well, even just the 3 or 4 or 5 books
Yeah.
that you've mentioned would be
Yes.
amazing.
Okay. No, that's right.
No pressure, but yeah.
No, I'll give a customized Vermont book list.
That sounds great.
I'll get that to Megan tomorrow, and I'll jot down some of the ones I've mentioned. But I do read a lot of books because I write for Grain News and have for 27 years. And so when I read a book that I think I can translate into the culture of agriculture, then I want that to help. And what I mentioned about that scale of 1 to 10, ask your mom and dad, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to go to a financial planner? Because Elaine Froese says you need to figure out how you're going to secure your income streams for the next 20 or 30 years. And if the mom says 2 and the dad says 9, you know you have a problem. And that exactly happened, Bruce, where a young woman who was a farm marketer, she said, Elaine, that's all I needed to hear. I am now leaving because I am not prepared to be financially responsible for my parents. Thank you for letting me understand that.
Powerful, powerful lessons. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care, everybody. And
yep.
also, Bruce, I think I had my number up there, but if you've got a pen in hand, 204-534-7466. If anybody wants to text me, and you just have to Google farmfamilycoach.com if they want to reach out for a discovery call or any further resources. And I hope we can do this again. This may be the start of a long journey together, so it would be great.
I hope so too. I will close the session by reminding people that we will be back at 11:30 We'll be in a break for the next 25 minutes or so. We'll be back at 11:30 with Phyllis Van Amberg, who is speaking about how do we make money as grazers.
Well, that's a
Important
good
stuff.
one.
That's a good one. So thank you very much, Elaine. Just tremendous. And I know our audience really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Great.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.